The letter on my dock. You don't own the lake, Marlene hissed across the table, her lipstick cracking as she forced the smile of someone who thought she held all the cards. Oh, if only she knew. That was the line echoing in my head when this entire mess began, all because of a single sheet of paper taped to my dock like some royal summons. You have to picture it. A perfect Saturday morning. The kind of morning where the lake was glassy and blue, and the only sound was the rhythmic knock of my boat rocking against the pier. Birds chirped, kids shrieked faintly down the cul-de-sac, sprinklers ticked. Then there it was, white paper catching the sun, fluttering slightly in the breeze as if it wanted to be noticed. I leaned down, pulled it loose, and instantly felt the thick, officious cardstock. HOA stationery. That damned embossed logo a maple leaf over rippling water, as though they owned the entire neighborhood, the air we breathed, and apparently now, my dock. I hadn't even opened it yet, and I could smell the arrogance like expensive perfume at a discount store. I tore the letter open. Immediate removal of unsightly vessel cluttering the community's view of the lake. I laughed out loud, the sound bouncing across the water. Unsightly vessel? My boat is a 32-foot Cobalt cruiser, polished to a shine, the kind of boat realtors brag about in glossy pamphlets. Unsightly? The only unsightly thing that morning was the permanent scowl of Marlene Whitaker, our HOA president and self-declared guardian of suburban virtue. The letter ended with a threat. Failure to comply would result in fines up to $200 per day. Classic Marlene. Always dangling penalties like a fisherman with a worm, convinced we'd bite because no one dared question her rules. But here's the thing, my family doesn't just own a boat. We own the water beneath it. Decades ago, before the HOA was even a twinkle in a developer's eye, my grandfather purchased the water rights to Maplewood Shores. Back then, it wasn't some manicured community. It was a scrappy little reservoir where fishermen drank cheap beer and kids swam under a rope swing. My grandfather saw value, others didn't, and he bought the rights outright from the county. Everyone forgot about that little legal quirk, everyone except us. So as I stood there on my dock, letter trembling in my hand, I felt the strangest combination of irritation and amusement. Irritation at Marlene's gall. Amusement at how badly this was going to backfire. That evening, I walked down the street to return the letter in person. Marlene's house was impossible to miss. Perfect lawn, flagstone path, shutters painted an aggressively patriotic blue. And there she was, perched on her porch like a queen awaiting subjects. "You received my notice," she said, her voice sharp enough to slice glass. "I did," I replied, "and I thought you'd like it back." I held it out to her, careful not to crumple the paper. Evidence should always be preserved. She didn't take it. "Your boat must be gone by Monday. This is not negotiable. It obstructs the natural beauty of our lake." Our lake. I almost corrected her right then, almost pulled out the deed from the fireproof box where it had slept for decades. But no, not yet. Timing is everything in suburban wars, and Marlene thrived on spectacle. If she wanted to play to an audience, I'd let her build the stage first. Instead, I smiled. "Marlene, I'll take care of it." The satisfaction that spread across her face was almost worth the lie. She leaned back in her chair, smug and victorious, like a Caesar after a conquest. Over the next 2 days, I watched her parade around the neighborhood, whispering to anyone who'd listen. From my porch, I caught fragments. Finally standing up to him. Lowering property values, so entitled with that boat. She rallied her little court of loyalists, Mr. and Mrs. Flanders, who never missed a chance to complain about kids riding bikes too fast, and Sheila Montgomery, self-proclaimed keeper of the community Facebook page. By Sunday night, I wasn't just the man with the boat. I was public enemy number 1. That was when I realized something. This wasn't just about my cruiser. This was about power, control. Marlene needed a villain to keep her throne, and she had chosen me. Fine. If she wanted a villain, I'd give her one. I took the letter, smoothed its creases, and pinned it to my fridge. A reminder, not of defeat, but of the opening shot in a war she thought she was winning. The next morning, my phone buzzed with an email from the HOA. An emergency meeting had been scheduled for Wednesday evening. The subject line, discussion of unpermitted watercraft violations. I stared at the words, adrenaline sparking in my veins. She was calling me out in front of everyone. Perfect. What Marlene didn't know, what no one in that room would see coming, was the trump card waiting in my file cabinet. A stack of yellowed papers that said, in the plainest legal terms possible, that this wasn't her lake. It was mine. And on Wednesday night, the entire neighborhood was going to find out. Marlene's fake emergency meeting. Mr. Lawson, is it true you refuse to comply with the HOA's direct order? Marlene's voice cracked like a whip across the room, her manicured fingers stabbing the air as if she were pointing out a felon. I didn't answer. Not yet. Because silence, in the right moment, is more powerful than any defense. And trust me, the room was already humming like a hive, everyone waiting for me to sting. The clubhouse smelled faintly of coffee and fresh carpet cleaner, but underneath was something sour, the nervous sweat of 50 neighbors crammed shoulder to shoulder. Whispering rose and fell like waves. Every pair of eyes flicked between me, slouched deliberately in the back row, and Marlene, who stood at the front with a stack of glossy photos clutched in her hand. She held them high, as though they were smoking gun evidence in a courtroom. This, she snapped the top photo forward, a grainy, zoomed-in shot of my boat, is what happens when one resident decides the rules do not apply to him. This monstrosity has been allowed to sit like a blight, lowering the property values of every hard-working family in Maplewood Shores. A few gasps, a murmur. Sheila Montgomery, queen of the Facebook group, shook her head dramatically, already rehearsing the post she'd make later. The Flanders couple whispered to each other, clutching their copies of the HOA bylaws like hymnals. I let my eyes wander over the crowd. Some neighbors leaned forward, practically salivating over the drama. Others avoided my gaze, unwilling to be seen on either side of the battlefield. This wasn't just a meeting. It was theater. And Marlene loved theater. She adjusted her blazer, her pearl earrings catching the fluorescent light. According to Article 4, Section 9 of our bylaws, she intoned, no unpermitted watercraft shall be docked on community access property. That's when I almost laughed. Almost. Because here's what she never bothered to research. That lake wasn't community access. Not legally. Not technically. Not in the way she wanted to pretend. But if she wanted to wave bylaws around like scripture, I wasn't about to stop her sermon. Not yet. From the front row, a man I barely recognized raised his hand. But it's a nice boat, he offered timidly, earning a death glare from Marlene. It is irrelevant if it's a yacht or a dinghy, she snapped. This is about fairness. This is about order. This is about protecting the community we built together. The word together landed like a brick. She didn't mean together. She meant under her. I leaned back, arms crossed, studying her performance. She waved another photo, this one showing a wide shot of my dock, the cruiser glinting in the sun. She held it up as though my boat had personally stolen candy from a child. Do you see? She asked the crowd. Do you see what happens when one resident disregards the collective good? If we allow this, what next? Jet skis roaring at midnight? Rusting fishing boats left to sink? We must act now before Maplewood Shores becomes a junkyard. The murmurs swelled. She was winning them, one exaggeration at a time. And I'll admit, sitting there, watching her spin her web of lies, there was a part of me that enjoyed it. Because the higher she climbed on her soapbox, the further she'd fall when I cut it out from under her. From behind me, someone whispered, "Are you going to say something?" The voice was sharp, nosy Mrs. Pritchard, who never missed a single HOA event because it was her only entertainment. Not yet, I murmured back. Marlene slapped the stack of photos onto the podium like a judge slamming her gavel. Therefore, I motion that the HOA levy daily fines of $200 against Mr. Lawson until this obstruction is removed, effective immediately." A collective intake of breath swept the room. Even people who despised me shifted in their seats, uneasy at the number. $200 a day was no slap on the wrist, it was financial war. This was the moment she thought she had me cornered. I sat forward, finally drawing attention. The shift was subtle, but heads turned. My silence had been bait, and now the room was straining for the sound of my voice. "Marlene," I said evenly, "before we start handing out punishments, maybe we should clarify something." Her eyes narrowed, suspicious. "Clarify what?" I let the pause hang in the air, stretching just enough to make the whispers swell again. "Whether or not you even have jurisdiction over that dock or that water." A ripple of confusion swept through the crowd. Someone coughed. Sheila's phone buzzed, but she didn't dare look away. Marlene's voice wavered for the first time all evening. "Of course we do. The HOA governs all community property." "Community property," I repeated softly. "Right." I leaned back again as if settling in for a show. "We'll see about that." For the first time, I saw a flicker in her eyes, something small, something nervous. She recovered quickly, masking it with another glare, but the crack was there. And I knew, in that moment, the trap she had set for me was about to close on her instead. Because next time we gathered in this room, I wouldn't be silent. I'd be armed. And when I revealed the truth, the entire lake would turn against her. Owning the lake. Owning the room. "This entire lake," I said, holding the yellowed deed high above my head, "belongs to me." The clubhouse went dead silent. No whispers, no throat clears, not even the hum of the vending machine in the corner. 50 pairs of eyes widened in unison, the weight of my words slamming into the room like a storm front. And right there at the podium, Marlene Whitaker froze, her mouth opening just enough to catch the light but not enough to form a single sound. You could practically hear the collective gasp ripple through the crowd. A man in the back choked on his coffee. Sheila Montgomery's phone slipped from her hand and hit the carpet with a dull thud. It was a moment so perfect, so cinematic, I half expected someone to cue dramatic music. But let me back up. It was Tuesday evening, the official follow-up meeting to Marlene's so-called emergency session. The agenda she'd circulated in her usual sanctimonious email was vague, discussion of community standards violations. But everyone knew what it meant. My boat. My dock. Her crusade. I'd prepared all weekend, digging through my grandfather's papers, confirming everything with a real estate attorney just to be sure. The deed was authentic. Legal. Ironclad. Decades old, but still binding. The manila folder containing it sat on my lap during the entire meeting, glowing like a holy relic only I knew how to wield. Marlene opened the session with her usual flourish, clapping her hands twice for attention. She looked sharp, deliberate, her blazer pressed within an inch of its life. "Neighbors," she began, "we gathered tonight to protect the value and integrity of Maplewood Shores." She paused to let the words marinate. "One resident continues to disrespect our bylaws and, by extension, all of you." Eyes turned toward me. Some sympathetic, some hostile, most just hungry for entertainment. I didn't move, didn't speak. I wanted them leaning forward, waiting for me to crack. Marlene launched into her speech, rehashing every tired line. Unsightly vessel. Obstruction of the natural view. Erosion of property values. She even brought poster boards this time, blown-up photos of my boat positioned like crime scene evidence. I swear she would have added dramatic arrows and caution tape if Staples sold it. She finished her monologue with a pointed jab. Mr. Lawson has ignored fines, ignored notices, and ignored this community. That ends tonight. That was my cue. I rose slowly, letting the chair scrape against the tile for maximum effect. Heads swiveled. Someone whispered, "Here it comes." I walked to the front, the manila folder tucked under my arm. "Marlene," I said evenly, "you've made your case, but there's something you've left out, something very important." She crossed her arms, smirk tugging at her lips. "And what's that?" I pulled out the document, its edges yellowed with age. "This." The room leaned in as if gravity itself had shifted toward me. I unfolded the deed carefully, theatrically, the paper whispering as it opened. "This is the deed to Maplewood Lake, purchased in 1973 by my grandfather, Henry Lawson. Transferred to my father in 92, and then to me. Every shimmering acre, every drop of water, mine." That's when the silence cracked open. Gasps, mutters, a muffled laugh from someone who clearly enjoyed watching Marlene's empire collapse in real time. The Flanders couple exchanged wide-eyed looks, clutching their bylaws like life preservers. Sheila actually said, "Wait, what?" louder than she probably intended. Marlene's face went pale, her perfectly applied foundation doing little to hide the blotchy red rising on her neck. That's impossible," she stammered. "The HOA controls community property. It's in our charter." I let her sputter. Then I smiled. "Your charter doesn't override county property records. You can't fine me for parking on water I own. In fact," I glanced around the room, milking the moment, "you can't fine anyone for what they do on this lake, because it isn't yours." The murmurs turned to chatter, neighbors suddenly scrambling to rewrite their alliances. A fisherman who'd grumbled about my boat last week now looked thrilled, as if I'd just handed him a golden ticket to fish wherever he pleased. Kayakers whispered with glee. Even a few of Marlene's die-hard loyalists looked like they'd just watched their queen's crown roll off the podium. Marlene tried to recover. "This is highly irregular," she sputtered, but her voice lacked its usual steel. "Highly inconvenient for you," I corrected, "but not irregular." I let the deed rest on the podium for everyone to see, its seal, signatures, and notary stamp gleaming under the fluorescent light. The room buzzed with possibility. Neighbors imagining what it meant, what they could do, how different life could be without Marlene's leash tightening around their weekends on the water. Then I leaned forward, lowering my voice just enough to make people lean in. "And since I own the lake, I suppose I could create my own rules. New rules?" The chatter stopped cold, the tension swinging back to me. A few nervous laughs fluttered in the air. Marlene's eyes widened in panic. I tapped the podium lightly, like a judge signaling order. "We'll talk more about that soon." And with that, I gathered the deed, tucked it back into its folder, and walked back to my seat. The room was electric, buzzing with whispers, shock, and the unmistakable scent of fear radiating off Marlene. She sat frozen, lips parted, powerless for the first time in her reign. But me? I just smiled, because for the first time in Maplewood Shore's history, the lake wasn't hers, it was mine, and I hadn't even told them the best part yet.